If you're a heating and air conditioning technician and you want to talk about heat exchangers with a homeowner, what do you need to know before you have that conversation? This is an important conversation. I'm Scott Bell. I'm coming to you live for HVAC technician sales secrets on a perfect day to talk about sales and a perfect day to talk about you. Today, we are going to talk about heat exchangers. And, you know, if you're just getting new to heat exchangers, they're just a pocket inside of a furnace that move a flame and move gas. That's it. That's what they do. But they do fail over time. And what you need to know is, given enough time in a home, enough lack of maintenance or improper install, every heat exchanger is probably going to fail. You're like, Scott, not every heat exchangers fail. I said probably. There's a few out there that probably won't. Okay, so you're going to have to get past perfection on this. So this is an important video for a lot of reasons. There's a lot of technicians in the world of heating and air that live on cracked heat exchangers. Like, they can't set a lead unless it's got a crack. And the problem with that is it makes buyers suspicious. If there's a crack there, yeah, there's a crack there. But here's the problem. If you live off of selling systems off of cracks, you're probably going to be good for part of the year. You're going to struggle for the rest. That's not an absolute, it's a probability, okay? It's not good. It's not being good at conversation and sales if you can only set leads off of a crack in a heat exchanger. So I would ride with technicians and we would go out in the field. They would get their training. They would go through heat exchanger class. We would go to a system and it would be known for having a crack. You know the models, you know the equipment, you know the brands. I'm not going to name them here. Go to the attic. Technician pulls out the mirror, pulls out the burners, crack in the heat exchanger. They lose their freaking minds. Crack in a heat exchanger. Woo, crack in a heat exchanger. And I have to calm them down. I'm like, do you do the same thing when there's a bad capacitor? No. You do the same thing when there's a bad gas valve? No. Do you do the same thing when there's a bad indoor blower motor? No. Do you do the same thing when there's an inducer motor that's bad? No. Why are you excited about a cracked heat exchanger? And like, well, because that person has to get a new system. Like, no, they don't. They can get that system repaired and they may not do anything about it. Depending upon the jurisdiction you're in, some gas companies could care less if there's a crack in the heat exchanger. Some of them will red tag the furnace and shut it down. But if you notice a crack in a heat exchanger and you figure out that there's one there, it's not your job to freak out and go to crazy town. Ah, crack in a heat exchanger, right? It's a part. It's a part. Yes, it has potentials to do other things, but you have a role and responsibility to finish up everything you're doing before you deal with it. Now, Scott, my name's Scott Bell. I have made mistakes. Story time. There is a house that every time I drive past, I think about it because they had a furnace that it was a downflow, it was a counterflow, and I knew that from the brand that if I took my camera and my meter, there was like a 99% chance that there was a crack in the heat exchanger. So what does Scott do? Not something very smart. Scott goes, pulls off the 3/8 nuts on the blower motor, pulls the blower motor out, takes my scope. 12 minutes. 12 minutes I'm having a conversation with the homeowner. You need a new system. Hi, I did things the wrong way. Just want to let you know I'm not perfect. I make mistakes too. Right? I lost my ability to have a good conversation on that call because I was too quick to have the conversation about a crack in a heat exchanger. This is why I say, find a crack in a heat exchanger should be the last thing you talk about. Not explaining how a system works, right? Like, your job is to slow down the process. You find a crack in a heat exchanger, you have to be willing to communicate what's going on, why it happened, how it happened, age, airflow, maintenance. Those are the three top reasons why systems have problems when they have a crack in a heat exchanger. Using scare tactics. Oh my goodness. I was on a call with a technician in Southern California, riding with this guy, and just goes off the rails. Goes to the homeowners, your house is gonna blow up. And I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. No, you're not doing this with me. So I took over the call and said, hey, like, look, I'm here to help this guy out. House isn't gonna blow up. Here's your situation, here's what's going on. I'm not gonna have somebody do scare tactics when I'm riding with them and then be okay with it. So don't use scare tactics. There's no reason for that. Number 6, not being willing to show a picture. Hey, in this day and age, and I've got a cell phone in my pocket, I'm recording on a cell phone, I got a cell phone out in the car, I've got a boroscope, I've got a lens that I can look at a heat exchanger. Like, you should be able to prove to a homeowner without a certainty, without a shred of doubt that you're at their property. So here's what I would do. If it was a video, pull out my phone, be like, hey, I'm Scott, I'm here in Sacramento, and here's what I'm doing. I'm at the Smith residence, and here we go. If it was any other type of video, I would try to do something similar to prove that that's where I was, so they couldn't go, you're not at my house, that's somebody else's furnace. So I see the technicians, when we talk about scare tactics, they'll go into the whole thing of like their CO2. If you read enough and you look at enough furnaces and you look at enough writing from manufacturers for warranty doesn't require CO2. Now, you can verify this. I encourage you to do it because it's going to help you out. The presence of CO2 is not required for a heat exchanger to fail. A crack in a heat exchanger is the reason that system's failed. Not CO2, not flame rollout, not anything else. If there's a crack in that heat exchanger, that is a failed part. It's done. I don't care who the manufacturer is. You can ask your rep, where's the writing that says when a part has failed? They have to be able to give you one for warranty reasons. They're out there. Every manufacturer has one. I would ride with technicians, or sometimes I'd have to do second opinions for the company that I worked with, and I would get in the attic with the technician, I'd get in the garage, and we'd have this conversation. They'd go, hey, Scott, our manual says that there is a crack in this heat exchanger, and I need this sale. Can you just sign off that there's a crack? And I'm like, no, we're not going to just sign off that there's a crack. Show me where it's at. And I could think of a time that the type of furnace that it was on had two heat exchangers, and they went from huge to narrow. And this thing was up in an attic. And I look at it, the blower wheel was out, and I climb into the cabinet and I look at it. I'm like, this thing, if there was a crack, it should crack at the first turn. This is all the way at the back. And the guy is up in the attic with me. The guy had been in the industry for years. He's like, Scott, just call it. I'll go sell them a new one. I go, no. Like, my name is on the line here. Like, we got to be certain that there is a crack. So they had an all-style coil. Pull off the cover of the all-style coil, and I reach in there, and I'm trying to feel for a crack with my fingernail, trying to get to the crack of my fingernail. Pull my fingernail out, it was a piece of RTV sealant. And the technician that was with me was pissed. He was angry. He was like, you just cost me a sale. I go, dude, there's other things going wrong with this system that you can have a conversation about. He's all, no, but if they got a cracked heat exchanger, they have to get a new furnace. So you got to be certain that there is a crack, because you put somebody behind you that knows furnaces maybe better and can look around and say, hey, there's not one there. There's an issue. There's a problem. So you got to be certain that there is actually an issue. So we talked about my mistake that I got to the damage too quickly. I was too fast. Pull out the blower motor, scope, 12 minutes. Guy's kicking me out of his house, as he should have. I did the wrong thing. I didn't take the time. I didn't explain to him what was going on. I lost that call. It was out of control because of me. You got to own your process. There's three things left. Building a ticket. So if you think as a technician, you got to go in there and build the biggest ticket possible so that you can set a lead to get a new system, you're wrong. I will talk to anybody about that any day of the week. If your system costs $10,000 where you're at, you only need roughly 5% of damage to set a lead. If you got a $20,000 system, that's $1,000. Like, you don't need to set these huge giant tickets for $10,000, $15,000, $16,000 wherever you're at. And if somebody's training you for that, I'm going to tell you that's absolutely balderdash. Last two on this list, there's some things when it comes to faking stuff that's not cool. Faking that a new one can't be installed or replaced. There are heat exchangers that are obsolete. And there are companies that will say, we don't replace heat exchangers, we just replace furnaces only because of the liability. If that's the case, you are 100% correct. No problem, do your thing, okay? But if you get to a call and you're like, hey, part's obsolete, don't even call the manufacturer, don't even verify, don't know for certain, and you're just like, it can't be repaired, it's got to be replaced, you're setting yourself up for failure. Because if I was a technician that came behind you, I would call the rep right on the phone and say, hey, can I get this heat exchanger? Is it in stock? And what's availability time? Which brings me to the last point. There's nothing wrong with calling the manufacturer and finding out how long it takes to get a new one. Now, some of the manufacturers around Christmas time shut down. There's a couple of them in Texas that I know of. That, like, right around December 18th to January 5th, they're closed. So there are times where this is true, where you meet with the buyer and they're like, well, I want to get a new heat exchanger. I really can't do anything with it. I don't know availability. Manufacturer is closed from roughly December 18th to January 5th. We can find out January 5th. Person says, well, I want to get a new furnace. That's acceptable. I will share with you that if you go through the order of operation and explain how a piece of equipment works in the order of operation, there's a lot of times when you do this right, that the person will go, sounds like there's a lot wrong here. Let's just get a new one. okay? You don't have to live on heat exchangers to sell systems. In fact, it makes your life a whole lot easier internally as a technician, but also as a company. So I would say get good at explaining damage. You don't need a cracked heat exchanger to sell a furnace, I promise you. You got one thing to do from here, just one thing. Find the subscribe button, click on it. Every time I send out a video, you'll get an update that says, HVAC technicians sell secrets, send out another video. You should check it out, which you should. We'll see you soon.